Hello there, and thanks for joining me. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from 2012. This is a wine labelled as a Sauternes, but in fact it's from the commune of Barsac. This is Chateau Myrat. And just to try and explain that, wines from Barsac are from one of the 5 communes that comprise the Sauternes appellation. So you have Barsac, Prégnac, Beaume, Fargues and Sauternes itself. So sweet wines made according to the regulations from any of those 5 communes may label themselves as Sauternes, as Chateau Myrat has chosen to do. However, wines that are produced within the commune of Barsac may choose to label themselves as Barsac instead. In fact, some chateaux have been known to offer customers the option as to which they would prefer the wine to be labelled as. In broad terms, Barsac tends to be a little lighter and more citric in style, while wines from the communes of Beaume, Fargues and Sauternes particularly tend to be richer, more tropical fruited and honeyed. And part of this is a result of the differing soils that you'll find in Barsac, which are a mixture of clay and sandy gravel, where from the rest of the appellation you will tend to find more gravel in the soils. So Chateau Myrat is owned by the Pontac family, and they're descendants of a really famous Bordeaux wine dynasty from the 16th and 17th century. Famous principally for the fact that in 1553 Jean de Pontac founded the Haut Brion estate, which was one of the most celebrated estates of the time and arguably still is. The family's name is also seen, however, in association with other wine estates, principally Chateau Pontac en Plaisir and Chateau Pontac Lynch. And as well as giving their name to these chateaux, there's also an obscure grape variety grown mostly these days in South Africa that is used in the Cape winelands to make sweet wine that's called Pontac. Chateau Myrat is a 30-hectare estate with 22 hectares of vines. So as well as the vines, there are 8 hectares of park and a beautiful English garden and some woodland. The current chateau was rebuilt in 1730, but is on the site of some much older cellars. And this rebuilding was done by a wealthy lawyer of the time, the name of Monsieur de Myrat. Now in 1855, the quality of the wines being made here caused them to be classified as a second growth in the classification of Sauternes and Barsac, a process that was conducted at the same time as the more famous classification of the Medoc. Now Chateau Myrat very nearly lost its rights to grow grapes. Evidently back in 1976, the then owner, Comte Max de Pontac, made what was for him a hugely painful decision to grub up the entire vineyard. His reasoning was that the wines of Sauternes were becoming difficult to sell and the property was really hard to maintain, and this was the first time that any of the classified growths had gone down this route. After Max de Pontac's death, however, his 2 sons, Jacques and Xavier de Pontac, moved from Paris to take over the running of the estate with the intention of resuming the production of wine here. To their horror, they found that they only had a few months to replant the vineyard before the estate's planting rights would expire. So in an amazing effort, the 2 brothers managed to acquire 150,000 vines and have the entire 22-hectare vineyard replanted within a few weeks, enabling the estate to maintain its right to grow grapes and produce wines. Now the replanting used traditional grape varieties. Evidently the vineyard is planted with 88% of Semillon, 8% of Sauvignon Blanc and 4% of Muscadel. A team of vignerons was rapidly established. Following year, the cellars were fully restored and the first new vintage of wine from Chateau Myrat was produced in 1991. They were really unfortunate in the following couple of vintages as frost and rain destroyed the crop and they were unable to make wines at all. However, this amazing effort did really mark a renaissance for the estate, which had really quite clearly fallen into a state of neglect. By 2012, the replanted vines were beginning to show some reasonable age in the vineyard, and now the vines planted at this stage have reached full maturity and are capable of consistently producing fruit suitable to make high quality wines. And the estate is once again being recognised for the quality of its wine. Now, as far as its location is concerned, the estate sits on a plateau, the Haut Barsac plateau. Here it has a principally limestone and clay soil over a bedrock of fissured limestone. Now, the 2012 vintage did cause some problems due to the unpredictable nature of the weather. A wet spring affected flowering and a dry summer delayed the development of botrytis. This is normal for the region, Picking went on in a number of trees or passes through the vineyard to make sure that only those grapes affected by botrytis were selected, and this obviously resulted in a harvest with low yields but with a very high concentration of sugars. Now, very traditional winemaking processes are used. That starts with a really slow pressing and selection of the best press fractions. Unlike most other wines, you'll find that it's the later pressings of Sauternes that have most of the richness, concentration, the honeyed notes, the flavours. Fermentation took place in French oak barriques, 225 litre barrels. Of those, about a third are new every year, with a third being second fill and the other third being third fill barrels. The wine aged in barrel for about 18 months, with regular rackings being conducted every 3 months. Now, I did look to see if I could find out what the blend of this particular wine was, and the only information I could find was that the blend is 88% Semillon with 8% of Sauvignon Blanc and 4% of Muscadel, and that is suspiciously exactly the same as the plantings in the vineyard. So as far as I can see, the exact blend hasn't been made public, but one would assume that it is somewhere along the lines of the proportions of those varieties planted in the vineyard. Again, I couldn't find a definitive sweetness level that I could trust on this, but I would assume a Sauternes of this quality is going to be somewhere between about 100 and 120 grams per litre of sugar. So let's take a look at it, shall we? The colour is absolutely magnificent in the sunshine. It's a beautiful, rich, golden yellow colour. As I'm swirling the wine here, it's very happily clinging to the sides of the glass there, although it does seem a little reticent to form tears. Oh, there we go, yes. The wine's alcohol is listed as 14%, and if it does have sort of somewhere in the region of 110 grams per litre of sugar, that will all add to its viscosity. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are rich and honeyed. There's a burnt top note of toffee, but then beneath that there are some lovely rich, ripe, juicy notes of apricot, orange, perhaps even hints of pineapple coming through there. And those aromas are all combining wonderfully harmoniously to give a rich, honeyed, attractive nose. So let's have a taste, shall we? The wine is sweet and it has good acidity. However, I wouldn't say it was lusciously sweet. I would probably put it at about 100 grams per litre of sugar. And those notes of toffee and caramel are very much the fore. There are some drying, oxidative, savoury notes that are adding some complexity. There's almost a touch of coffee overlaying the mid-palate. Then I'm getting more honeyed fruit notes opening. There are notes of dried apricot, mandarin, candied peel. There's perhaps an underlying marzipan, vanilla sort of note coming through. Again, all nicely, harmoniously tied together with quite a honeyed finish. The wine's of mid-weight. The alcohol is well in balance. It's not standing out from or overwhelming the fruit at all. And the finish is resolved into notes of honey, orange and candied peel that are lasting very nicely. There are slight notes identified as coffee earlier that are almost giving the finish a touch of a sort of a creme brulee character. This isn't a huge wine, it isn't a luscious wine. However, it's at a very nice stage of development. There's an awful lot of complexity in here. Everything's lovely and harmonious and the flavours are lasting really well. I've seen a suggestion that this is a wine that would age out to 2038. That may well be correct. Having said that, it's not the most concentrated wine, and although it's got well-balanced acidity, I wouldn't say it was particularly high. I would personally suggest that if you currently have some 2012 Myrat in your cellar, it's probably worth drinking up over the next 3 or 4 years, because this is lovely now. It's not a hugely concentrated wine, and I don't know that it's necessarily going to develop much more. Looking at its Wine Searcher aggregated critic score, I see it has 89 out of 100. I think that's a completely fair score. 89, maybe 90 points would be fair to it. So yes, the wine's an elegant and really quite entrancing wine. I think it really does show some of the beauty and some of the individualistic style that actually is Barsac as opposed to Sauternes. So I will very much enjoy, with the help of some friends, finishing this bottle of wine. Thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you found this tasting of interest. If you have enjoyed it, it would be fantastic if you'd press the like button. Really appreciate that. That really does help to boost the viewing of these videos. If you've been watching my videos and you haven't subscribed yet, it would be fantastic if you'd consider doing that. If you have friends you think might like to watch them, feel free to pass it on to them. That would be great. Importantly, if you have any comments, do please pop them in the comments box below. I'd love to know what you think about the wines I'm looking at, the tastings I'm doing, or anything else that relates to that. I will of course leave a link in the notes below to the wine searcher page for this vintage of this wine. There you can find out about pricing and availability, but you'll also find there's an awful lot of background information about the wines attached to those pages. So thank you so much again for joining me, and I do hope that maybe you'll make some time and come and join me for another tasting in the very near future. Until then, bye for now.